behaviour for the first time often means long periods in hides. And nothing demanded more patience than cameraman Paul Stewart's trip to film displaying birds of paradise. The location for the Bird of Paradise filming was the Tari Valley in the remote, jungle-covered highlands of New Guinea, a place completely cut off from the outside world until the 1950s. It's home to the Huli people, whose support was going to be vital to the success of this shoot. After negotiating with the local landowners for access to the neighbouring jungle, the team were ready to begin. The first job was building the hides. This had to be done quickly to avoid disturbing the birds. Each bird of paradise has its own favourite display site. Finding them would have been almost impossible without local expert Joseph Tano. The plan was to film 3 species of birds of paradise here, which meant setting up 3 different hides. The next morning, the team were up, bright and very early.
It seems the bird of paradise is the original early bird. It displays very, very early in the morning, and that means we have to get up even earlier, normally about 3:45. If we don't get up earlier than the bird, we're going to scare it, and that means 8 hours sat in a hide for no reason.
Obstacles to progress appeared sooner than expected.
Look at what the bridge is made of. It's not going to support... I don't think that's going to support the truck.
With the vehicle stuck, the last part of the journey had to be made on foot. Arriving later than planned meant extra care was needed getting into the hide if the birds were not to be disturbed. Paul's solitary vigil was about to begin.
You might think that to film something as showy and as exotic looking as a bird of paradise, you'd need to trek into the deepest, thickest rainforest. But funnily enough, Paul's hide is just at the bottom of this field, about 100 metres away. It's funny that while we have blue tits in our back garden, the Hulis have birds of paradise.
For the next 6 hours, Paul sat in the hide, and at midday, when there was no chance of disturbing the birds, it was time for an update.
Trapped in a root. Good news or bad news? Good news first. Good news, it's not scared of the hide. Bad news, we're in the wrong place. So we're going to have to move it. Let's move. We should do it quick before it moves on. It's really frustrating. I could see it if I crouched down there, but somewhere in a line up here, but I just couldn't move the camera to it. It's just moving way too much.
While the hide was being moved, the rest of the crew busied themselves with some bridge building.
Well, due to the incident this morning, we've decided to do some running repairs to this bridge. Unfortunately, these beautifully hewn planks won't necessarily be here in the morning, since the original planks were taken by an enterprising local to build a house, apparently. And this is premium firewood.
The gaps filled, a man and his pig were willing to give it the once-over. The pig looked none too sure. Back at the hide, things were looking up. Here, at least, was one of the birds of paradise the team wanted to film, the male, 6-plumed bird of paradise. But Paul needed him to display, and he wasn't going to do that unless a female showed up. So both bird and cameraman were now waiting for the girls. Exactly how long they would both have to wait was anyone's guess. Hours ticked by without any development, and the boredom was beginning to take its toll.
One of the things about sitting in a hide for 8 hours in a day is that you start to mull things over in your head, and it's the classic scenario where a song that you don't even particularly like, or in fact could even hate, comes into your head. And while I was waiting for these Birds of Paradise, I had it was kind of a one-hit wonder from the 80s, which was My Bird of Paradise, I Just Sit and Wait. Sweet bird of paradise. Going around and around and around, and it was like my own brain was sabotaging me.
The male kept busy tidying up his display site, but sadly all his efforts went unnoticed. 10 days went by without a hint of a female. And when things go wrong, one can't help speculating why. Was it the weather, or the amount of food in the forest?
I think one of the problems is that with the lack of rain, the fruits hadn't ripened. Now we've got rain, and it's getting a bit warmer. I think the fruits may ripen, and we're going to get all 3 species in one day. Yes.
I think optimism's good, Paul, because otherwise we sink into despair.
Judging from some of the looks, the Hoolie seemed to share our disappointments. But there were other things to feel positive about. The bridge remained intact. And when the truck got stuck in another rut, there was a group of villagers only too willing to help out. If only the female Birds of Paradise could be half as obliging. Paul had now spent more than 90 hours in this hide. But if Birds of Paradise weren't in the displaying mood, that wasn't true of the Hoolies. Just a short distance from where Paul sat, a festival was taking place. The Hoolies have been using Birds of Paradise feathers in their headdresses for centuries, and the traditional dance has an unmistakable similarity to that performed by the original owners of the feathers. It was certainly very impressive, though naturally no substitute for the real thing. 100 hours on, both Paul and his subject were becoming equally frustrated by the lack of females. Sweet bird of paradise. The shoot was beginning to go down, and news that the team now had to film the displays of 3 Birds of Paradise in 1 week filtered back to the locals. All very amusing, unless you were Paul.
I'm surprised he's a gibbering wreck by now. He's had 8 to 9 hours in a hide a day for just under 5 weeks. I think he's had about 5 filming opportunities. I mean, even by the standards of wildlife filming, that shows a high degree of patience. The sighting of one hide meant he actually had to stand up for about a week. Most of that was in the rain. I mean, that seems more like a cruel and unusual punishment than an opportunity to film one of the great natural spectacles.
Fortunately, when it comes to wildlife filming, patience sometimes pays off, and a female Bird of Paradise finally appeared. 120 hours on, it was, at last, something to dance about. Filming the displays of the other species was barely any easier. And after nearly 300 hours in hives, one can only wonder how many times Paul sang My Bird.